Welcome to the Smoke and Rope podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Basor, and today is episode 67, coming from me today from the new Covert Law, Michigan Cannabis Defender and Redemption office. Super excited. So I got a new look, and today we have on Nate Niehaus from Prima and Fast Flower Farms. Nate, thanks for being on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Kevin over at True, what's happening today?
Oh, just running around, man. Super excited to have Nate on the show. He's a genetic guy, and that's one of my things, and really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to kind of talk to him about stuff.
Great, yeah, I as well. And Tom at Real Leaf, looking sharp as always.
Thanks, man. Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation today as well. It's kind of dear to my heart, so nice to meet you, Nate.
Right back at you, bud.
Yeah, no, this is a good one, and we've been, talking about genetics a lot on the side and the race in Michigan and what's going to happen. So Nate is a wealth of information. I first talked and met Nate through our mutual buddy, Jeff Dayton. And, not always easy to get a hold of at first. So Nate was very polite and got me, we got on a call. I think it was 6:30 a.m. one morning. We were both up and realized you knew what you were talking about and had a great conversation. And then you came out to the fundraiser in Pontiac we had with the foundation and raised a lot of money and really appreciated that. And then from that fundraiser, one of the prizes was Jake Abraham from Sticky Ippy, who used to be Tom Gore's chef. So he auctioned himself off as a prize, and now friend Ray from Bay Area Herbal Meds won it. And I went up to the dinner. It was incredible up at Ray's, and Nate was there, and that's when we started talking and came up with an idea that we're gonna kind of talk about here after we get into Nate's background. So Nate, thanks for coming on. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your marijuana travels, and how you made it to Michigan.
Sure, man. I've traveled a lot in my life, and what it boiled down to is, I've been kind of in the entrepreneurial space for a little while. I joined the military, used that to get as the GI Bill for that to go to college. I was broke, man, so I couldn't afford college, so I used the GI Bill to go to college. While I was in high school, I had a thing with cannabis then even. And so that was I think I popped my first seed in like 1999 or 2000. So relatively early, I started playing with popping seeds. And then, obviously in the military, cannabis wasn't a thing. On the back end of that, I jumped off and started doing some entrepreneurial stuff in the tech space. I started a sailing charter business kind of out of the country. And I've been looking at the cannabis space for a long time, just kind of trying to figure out how I was going to get into it. In that sailing charter business, one of my last clients ended up being a relatively large commercial cannabis grower over there on Vancouver Island in BC. And so he invited me to come up and check out his spot. I went up there, checked out his spot, talked myself into a job, shut down the sailing charter business. And at that point, I just kind of started looking around at the different states and found that Michigan was kind of on the come up at that time. And, why not kind of thing. And they don't let you, my original kind of, the place that I grew up is in Texas, and they don't let you grow dope there legally. So Michigan was a spot, man. So we came here, bought some land, put together a couple of licenses, and put together some money and built a commercial facility.
That's a pretty cool story. I didn't know all that back then. I was waiting to hear it. So very cool. Right now you have really two businesses. One is, you mentioned, I believe, Class C grow, but also now you're doing genetics, and really it's interesting. It's the model we've talked about as far as people have been, some of my friends like Kevin and Tom and different people oh, you could do this with clones. You could supply, you can sell them, supply them now. That's all in the law, which is awesome. But you're the first person I know and have talked to that's doing it and doing it successfully on the regulated market. Of course, that's been going on in Michigan for the last 12 years nonstop. But I feel like you're a little ahead in the game there. So tell me about your two businesses and how they're working.
Absolutely, man. So The degree that I went and got ended up being in finance, and so when you're a numbers guy, when you get a hold of the kind of the finance side of a grow, one of the things you realize very quickly is it's not just yield. I mean, that's the thing everybody wants to talk about, but it's how fast you can turn those flower rooms in combination with yield, and then also put out a high quality product. And yeah, definitely, there's variations in growing ability. There's variations in the kind of facility you design and its ability to keep environmental conditions correct. But then once you get past those two things, what you end up with is genetics. Genetics are the next thing, in terms of really being able to make a profitable cannabis cultivation company. And so when we were putting Fast Flower Farms together, that was one of the things I identified really early. I was like, we need access to really good genetics to make this particular model work. We started poking around here in Michigan, and yeah, you could find some, but there was a lot of question marks associated with those genetics. We didn't know if they were real. We didn't know if that was actually the cultivar that people named. I mean, there's a laundry list of companies who have gotten in some kind of trouble and gotten caught renaming cultivars. And so we weren't sure about that. There's residual pesticides and heavy metals that can be trapped in these plants from people spraying with the wrong stuff, in the caregiver market. And then, there's hops latent virus, which is a big deal. And that's all over the place. And yeah, it's not that big in Michigan yet, but it is big. And so as I was putting this together, I realized, man, there needs to be a company that you can trust out there that does this kind of genetics R&D. And so we said, what the hell, we'll give it a try. And we did. And then I think, honestly, we underestimated the size of the opportunity. And once it started off, then we were kind of in the right, we felt like we were kind of in the right space. And it's grown from there. We're expanding rather quickly. We're putting a tissue culture lab, and we'll be at this, for next year's outdoor, which is the big push for clone companies. For next year's outdoor, we'll be in the 25 to 30,000 clones per month production capacity, which is where it's kind of getting there.
That's cool. Really cool. Although I've been talking about this for a while. It's an interesting concept. We've seen it done, and everything you said. You're skeptical at first. There's a lot of new people who come to Michigan, and you never know. There are growers from Illinois that maybe weren't that good, and they're hired. But just it's a lot of BS out there, and it's exciting. Everything you've done is checked out, and we're working with you now. So that being said, why don't you kind of tell us, it was your idea, what we're going to do with the outlaw skunk
Sure,
with Redemption, and then I know Tom and Kevin are itching to ask some genetics questions. So
100%. So one of the things, okay, so this is a hypothesis, but I think when these cannabis markets open up, what happens a lot of times is you get a lot of new kind of users, or just early users that are coming into the regulated market on the consumer side, at the retail side. And so they're often looking for these fruit forward varieties, something easy, pleasing, something like that. But once you've done that for a little while, or if you were active back before that happened, I think you look back and you go, man, remember those skunks? Remember those really weird terpene profiles that we had? Super gassy strains, the skunks, all this, just like this kind of, it's almost nostalgic. These older cultivars and terpene profiles. And so when we were hanging out at that dinner the other night, you and I just kind of started talking about that, and I was like, man, we have access to a couple of different genetics in that kind of old skunk lineage that have some stories behind them. And one of them is this outlaw skunk. And so we got a hold of some beans, some of them from Europe. We had to get them brought in from Europe, and then some of them from Mindo. And the Mindo ones were actually called outlaw skunk because what happened was everybody who was growing dope in Mindo was growing these big outdoor farms, and there was plant count restrictions, obviously, but not everyone abided by them. But the guys who got busted were the guys who were growing this particular variety of skunk, and that's because they could smell that skunk over anything else and locate the gardens from a long ways away. So that's the outlaw skunk, and my goal with Redemption here is to bring that back. So we've kind of been hoarding these genetics and finding some new stuff, all in the skunk lineage. We're going to do a big pheno hunt, and then we hope to release this with Redemption, the outlaw skunk.
Yeah, that's awesome, Nate. My first, remembrance of smoking kind bud back in the day was the skunk number one. One of my buddy's dad, he got it from one of the auto factories that he worked at, and he would stash it in his room. And I remember playing the game of his dad leaving, and then us going in the room and walking around the room with our noses trying to identify where's the spot. He would move it around, and he would get super creative, but he never ever could hide it from us because it was just that skunky, So super excited for you guys to work on that. I did want to touch on real quick. You had mentioned the hops latent virus earlier when you were talking about your history and whatnot, and a lot of growers aren't familiar with that. I wondered if you could quickly explain what the hops latent virus is. Is it systemic? Is it something that you can get rid of through tissue culture or treatment, or how does that all work? Since we're not all that familiar here in Michigan.
100%. And so the first thing I always start off with is I'm not a scientist, and oftentimes I say things that are incorrect, but I will tell you the best of my knowledge around hops latent. Now, hops latent is a viroid, and it exists in a lot of cannabis plants. At one point, there was a certain nursery in California, and I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus here, but there was a nursery in California that was giving out or selling, a lot of genetics. They ended up having something like 90% of their genetics actually ended up having hops latent, and it began to actually have an impact across the entire California marketplace. And what it is, it's also named Dutters, and as the name implies, what can happen is it can be latent in the plant itself. And it generally affects the plant. The way that you would see it is like different growth patterns. You'll definitely see a decrease in yield, potency, terpene content, and especially in propagation. Your strike rate for cloning will go down dramatically for that particular cultivar. And it can be spread a variety of different ways. There's not a great amount of research on all the different ways it can be spread, but the most common way is like common water, like if you're watering to runoff and all of that water can go down through the rest of your plants, it can go that way. It can be transferred through plant sap, cutting utensils, and a variety of other things like that. So it's super important to test all of your cultivars on the front end so that you're not giving out or you're not infecting the rest of your cultivation facility with hops latent, and then to be super sterile between cultivars. And even if you get a negative result from a hops latent test, you need to go back every so often, and our method is quarterly, and test all of your plant stock again, because as the name implies, it can be latent in the plant itself and only come forward with certain stress events. And when that happens, then it can be transmitted from plant to plant again. And to your point, it absolutely can be gotten rid of through tissue culture. It cannot be gotten rid of through nodal tissue culture, although that can happen. It's not a guarantee. The way it can for sure be gotten rid of is if you do proper meristem tissue culture, but that's a long process. That's a 6 to 9 month process to clean up that genetic, and it's not cheap either. So the easiest way for most cultivators to kind of put up a firewall, let's say, is to take, and it's typically 3 leaf samples, and the test is relatively affordable. It's $25, $30 or something like that, and take those to a lab, a trustworthy lab, and then have them run those tests. And then if you find they pop hot for hops latent and you really like that cultivar, it's a good idea to go to another mom or another version of that cultivar and test that again to be sure before you toss the plant.
Hey, Nate, what labs in Michigan are you familiar with that actually test for HLV?
So I have to admit that we only use one lab. And this is, I don't get anything out of this. I'm just going to tell you what we use. It's Viridis is the lab that we use here. And we spent a lot of money with those guys because we do a lot of testing. In fact, I just dropped off another bunch of new genetics that we just brought in because we also test for residual pesticide and heavy metals. because you never know what that plant has been grown with before you get it, unless you get it from a super trusted source. So anything that we even have a tiny question about, we take it in and get those tests done. Now, those tests are quite a bit more expensive. Those are a couple $100 a pop.
So do you obviously, since you're selling clones, you're testing everything that comes in? Do you have any plans on doing any in-house testing or anything?
Absolutely. Testing labs are relatively expensive to build correctly. And right now, it just doesn't make sense for us to basically undergo that capital investment, which is not going to have a real return for us for a little while. So it's not something I'm going to do in the near term, but we are building out a meristem tissue culture lab. And that's specifically to ensure that all of our mom stock is always coming out of meristem. So even if there is some problem, in the remote likelihood, it's totally cleaned up.
That's 100% of what we do at our facility here too. We have a lab, and we in-house, and annually we're taking meristem. So
yeah,
more power to be forward thinking on that. It's crucial. Yeah, if you're not doing
it,
that,
is. You may know that. You may know Griffin. Is that true?
I absolutely do.
Okay, cool. Him and I were texting about this right before, and that guy is
Imaginetics.
Yeah, exactly. That guy's a wealth of information.
Yeah, I recommend checking him out for sure if you don't know.
Yeah, I think we're about to. He's actually helping us design and build out this tissue culture lab.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right, yeah, he's a good dude. He's the one. He's helping us out too. So that's great, man. I had a question though. So we used to run the Super Skunk back in the day, and ran into the same situation where we could only, maybe 2-3 plants max out of the whole garden, just for the sake of. There aren't enough carbon filters and squirrel cage fans on planet Earth, especially what they used to cost, But I mean, so you're hunting right now. You've got beans. We've been looking. We're looking for the skunky, the funky. I want it to smell like a foot or a skunk or something, And we're just, we're batting zero. And we popped a lot of beans. What do you think is the elusive factor of the terpene? Combination is a specific terpene that we're missing? Is it a combination of terpenes that gets that just intense skunk smell? Why is it so elusive? It's like Sasquatch, man.
It kind of is a Sasquatch, right? It's because everybody has seen it at one point, but no one can find it again, kind of thing, right? Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you, man. And so I'm not educated enough to give you a good answer on like the specific terpene or the combination of terpenes. I think, honestly, a guy like Griffin would be able to tell you that, but I can't. What I do know is that what I hypothesize is that it got pulled out of people's gardens because they couldn't grow it without being busted. It was just so potent. But there's kind of another thing that ties into that, which is the way the current market is going. And this is, again, when new markets open up, you get a new kind of consumer. And this is a prohibition thing where, early in alcohol prohibition, what everyone was getting was like gasoline, like 150 proof alcohol. And that's what they wanted because, it was prohibition. They only had small packages and they were trying to get as much bang for their buck kind of thing. And some element of that translates into the cannabis industry where now we're looking for, everyone's shooting for 30 and 35% THC numbers. And a lot of these older varieties don't have that very high THC variety. And I think I would suspect that everyone on this podcast understands that THC is important, but it is a fraction of the overall cannabis experience. And to bring it back to alcohol, which I admit is not a perfect analogy here, but I never in my life have walked into a bar and ordered Bacardi 151 on the rocks, and that's because I actually enjoy my alcohol.
I think I have.
Oh, there he is. I have to admit, it's the first time I've heard that.
I was a bit of a wild guy when I was younger.
Oh, that's a surprise, right? But that gets so. And this is something Ryan and I were talking about, and it's like, man, what if we find the skunk? It like finishes in time. It's not like a 12-weeker like the GMOs, and it has the right terpenes, and it yields well, and it has all the right horticultural characteristics. but it only has a 15 or 16% THC number. You know what?
I'll buy it.
There we go, baby. There we go.
Yeah, Nate, you know, I kind of have a hypothesis on this whole topic as well. You know, there's been a lot of times over the years where I've been searching for things like you're talking about, and they're just, like Tom said, they're just not to be found. You know, I would go over to Amsterdam. I remember one time we went over there for the Cannabis Cup, and we went to every single coffee shop that entered in the Cannabis Cup that year. It was like 83 or something, and I'm looking for skunk number one. That's what I'm looking for, you know, because that's what the memories. And I start to wonder and think about, is it kind of an illusion in our brains? Is it something that like you remember something so well that over the years you think about it so much, and every time you think about it, it gets better and better? And it's the fish story. You catch the fish, and then every time you tell a story, it was a shark. It was huge. You know, like I half wonder if that is part of the problem. And then the secondary thing that I also got to was that. You know, nothing anymore is, you know, a straight indica or a straight sativa. I mean, everything's really a hybrid across the board. And with so much breeding and so much legalization going on and processing of the genetics over time, are we losing those original genetics, and are they ever going to be recoverable?
I mean, a true landrace, dude, is really hard to find. So one of the benefits of one of the things I did relatively early when I was building this company is I was on the hunt for a guy who just specialized in genetics. You know what I mean? One of those weird, like almost autistic guys that just specializes in genetics and that's all he knows, kind of thing. And we grabbed a hold of one of those guys, and he had been chasing these land races and had and done all of this traveling and pulling all these land races in. But I mean, do pure land races exist? Yeah, but you got to go out there and find them, man. You had to go to the source. But even once you do, I mean, if we're talking about commercial cannabis production, the vast majority of those are not and will not be in, you know, the first 5 or 6 generations commercially viable. I mean, you know this. I mean, they could take 18 to 24 weeks in flower. Some of them, and some of them are going to give you, you know, 20 grams a square foot on your yield. And so there's some commercial viability there. But I think you're probably right about the memory thing too.
I think keeping the genetic diversity is crucial, though, man. Bringing the land races in just to keep the pool as large as possible. And that's why we need caregivers, man. We need caregivers for many reasons, but that right there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So on the skunk one, I don't know, because like first time I ever smoked it, I know it was 1996. I was a year out of high school and got in Lansing, and we called it the Kevorkian around here. If everyone remembers that. And you know, you go to a concert or you go to have it, and you go to somebody's house and it's in your pocket, and the grandma come out and ask who got hit by a skunk. Like, oh, not like
Yeah.
it happened. I mean, that happened all the time. It was nuts. Like you could just, that was the loudest. But so maybe I'm hopeful. But maybe a little too hopeful. But the other thing is man, if they're bringing back, hopefully if they're able to bring back, they're talking about bringing back like woolly mammoths and all these other dinosaurs, maybe they can get back some land races too, put the technology there. But I wanted to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. I love following the Michigan cannabis market, and you know, like last year, Croptober, with a multitude of reasons that we had talked about on this show. There's about 4 or 5 other factors, was pretty intense. This year, you know, not as intense, you got to be honest with you, and there's reasons on that. But what are you seeing as far as on your end of it, Nate, with prices, attitudes? I know a lot of outdoors are got hit with the bud mold and the PM, and maybe just going to distillate, not the fresh frozen. But what are you seeing? And with that, what do you see as far as like the future with the price compression, and then even the strain wars that's about to happen?
Yeah, man, for sure. So I'll keep this pretty brief. I think Kevin wants to pop in here. So my answer would be pretty brief. I think that you have to have cultivars that are very specific to Michigan outdoor if you want to do outdoor. This is not an easy environment. It just is not an easy environment to grow in. And, there's parts of it like Southern Michigan, for example, that have a little bit more wiggle room in the outside kind of environmental. Once you get into mid Michigan, that changes a little bit. And I've got guys up in the UP talking about growing outdoor, and best of luck, bro. Best of luck. It's not that it can't be done, but you have to have genetics that are very specific to that kind of thing. Meaning, indoors, they need to be finished in 50 or 55 days. Now, there's a lot of ways to kind of get around that, for example, we got pulled into kind of a consulting arrangement with a very, very large Michigan outdoor producer. And the guy who was running that farm out there was actually running hemp before he was running this farm. And so over the course of talking, they were trying to spread out their outdoor harvest by delaying flowering, by feeding different nutrients, basically. And my first conversation with him was, you do not delay your flower out here, brother. Do not do that. You need to go on to the other side of it if you're trying to stagger out your harvest, which is you can plant plants that have either ruderalis plants, which are autoflowers, or plants that have ruderalis bred into them to dramatically increase or decrease your flower time, and then therefore stage out your harvest. But you do that on the front end and not the back end. To your point on price compression and strain wars, I mean, once you get a facility up, you get a good grower in there. The next competitive space that you have is your genetics.
Yeah, guys, I just wanted to follow up real quick on the topic of our remembrance of the old skunk number one. The other thing I always go back to is we're in grows all the time, right? And so our noses are getting hammered with terpenes and stuff all the time.
Yep.
And so people will come in my facility and be like, "Oh my God, it smells so good in here." It's like I don't literally smell anything. Like I smell the cheeseburger we just had for lunch, right? But like it's the same. Like I would switch vehicles with my girlfriend sometimes, and I'd have weed in the glove box, and she'd say like she's walking across the parking lot and can smell it, And then there's those times where you park your vehicle, you go do something for a couple of hours, and you come back and you open the door and you're like, Jesus Christ, what is in here? Like that. It's all of a sudden something you've had in your car for forever. It gets activated with the heat of the day or whatever it is, and the terpenes go. And so, yeah, I just wanted to throw out those kind of things too.
Man, I couldn't agree more.
I had a question about, you're talking about ruderalis and using strains like that for staggering your outdoor. Your company's name or your farm is Fast Flower Farms. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Is that the intent here, since it's a Michigan farm, that we need to be looking at strains that are finishing up in the shorter window period, working with the environment that you're in? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the Fast Flower Farm thing was just a nod to kind of commercial horticulturalists more than anything else. Don't get me wrong, that's not a brand that plays well with I guess the retail consumer, and so we're actually not going to kind of brand that way, but that is the name of our farm now.
Gotcha.
The reason I named it that is just because I think sometimes people coming out of the caregiver market or coming out of a market where it's less regulated and it's less expensive, they'll do things like flower 12-week plants, and more power to you. If you can get away with it, more power to you. We need that out there. But if I can flower 55-day plants and you're flowering 12-week plants, the longer that plant is alive, the more likely it is to contract some kind of disease, the higher your risk is. And by turning those rooms faster, you're paying your OPEX is roughly the same. By turning those rooms faster, and this is specifically for indoor, you're able to generate more revenue in the same space. And so that's where that comes into play. Now, for outdoors, yes, you have to have a genetic suited to your environment. And I was involved in a lot of kind of outdoor grows and takedowns this year, and we were testing a lot of different genetics in different outdoor environments. And, I'll give you a really good example. So we grew lava cake and ice cream cake in the same environment outdoors this year in Michigan. Both of them were ready first part of October. You could have taken them in that first week of October. We ended up taking them down a bunch of that particular garden for fresh frozen outdoor, and so that took forever to get down. And a guy had his baby, and it just got hectic. So to take down what we didn't take down for fresh frozen, we went out night before last and processed the rest of the students outdoor. And the ice cream cake, for example, no bud rot. Perfect, just these big spear colas, absolutely crushed. But the lava cake, which had a lot more bud on it, and up until that point had looked really good, is now covered in bud rot, and he lost 2/3 of the plant. So, I mean, even in that very short 10-day window, kind of right now, you can lose a lot. And if you take short flowering plants that have mold and mildew resistance, you plant those outside, or ruderalis, you can also beat Croptober. You can pull all your stuff in mid September and beat everyone else to the market, man. And that actually matters in outdoor.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So with turning it, let's go back to indoor really quick with the turning rooms over. I get it. As a numbers man, I'm sure you're looking bottom lines. But when we're talking about land races, genetic diversity, we have to have those longer flowering strains in there in play. I understand. We're trying to find the right genetic to run. Like we're looking for 11, 12 weekers that are viable. And the question is there more value to those types of products to offset the fact that you could be making more money running a shorter flowering plant?
I think sometimes there is, but that's also for the market to decide and not for me.
Right.
What I want to happen in the market is totally different than what happens in the market, 8 out of 10 times.
Of course.
I will say, for example, we have AJ's cut of the New York Sour Diesel, and it is phenomenal smoke. It's that old sour diesel that we all smoked back in the day, and I love it.
I want it bad.
Oh, I've got it, baby. And it's really good, but it's all of 11 weeks. And honestly, that kind of just falls then into like, this is probably better for caregivers kind of sale than is typically handed out to a commercial cultivation facility. So it is a math game. And yeah, we do have to hold, and we do hold some of those kind of genetics sacred. And honestly, like when I see somebody breed with like AJ's cut of sour diesel, I'm just like, no, don't do it, man. Don't do it. And I know commercial cultivation facilities that are running GMO all at 12 weeks, and they're getting pretty good money for their GMO because a lot of other people aren't growing it. So It may be the phase.
Right on.
So Nate, you mentioned holding a bunch of these genetics. Do you guys do that in tissue culture form, or how do you store those for a long period of time? I know that gets complicated.
It does, man. It's really good to have people who can visually like process numbers, because you have to walk into a room and be able to go, that one's there, this one's going to be ready then. And honestly, we do it in kind of perpetual mother cycles. We test our anything that comes in, then we flower verify it, then we test the bud on that. And that's just through a process of perpetual cloning. What we are moving into is exactly what you're talking about, which is basically putting them in stasis in tissue culture, and therefore having these kind of cycles of genetics that come through over the course of a year. And that's the most effective way to do it.
I found cryo to be extremely interesting. Can you explain that a little bit to people that may not know what that is?
I wish I could speak more intelligently about that. What I do know about it is that, actually, why don't you tell us about cryo?
Well, I can tell you what I understand too, which is probably about, you're asking the wrong dog. But my understanding is it's basically a virtual seed, right? It's a clump of tissue that is encased in like an agar, right? And then set in a cold environment in order to remain in stasis until you decide to run tissue culture or put it into the proper agar with the growth medium that has the right nutrients and hormones. Hormones are extremely important in tissue culture to ensure that it's amazing that you can remove rooting hormones and you just get branching out of a plant.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you're ready to add roots, you just you switch the medium to something that has rooting hormones in it and all the proper nutrients. I mean, it's a balance. It's definitely very tricky, but what an amazing time that we live in that we can do this. And it's crucial for anyone wanting a viable cultivation facility long term. You need to consider that.
I absolutely agree. But there's one catch there, which is cryo is is incredibly expensive to get up and running, and then having the right kind of person that can operate it. And then they also have to operate your tissue culture lab. And if you're combining those two things, those don't really positively impact, at least in the short term, your production. So you have to be able to offset those costs and or contract them out. I mean, I contract a lot of my marketing out. I contract a lot of my construction out. I contract all of my legal out. And so I don't need to have an in-house person for everything. We just need reliable people that we can contract some of these things out to. And that is a goal of ours in the very near future.
Very cool. Well, to wrap up, I actually have a hard out today, so I wanted to give Kevin and Tom and Nate a chance to say goodbye. And great conversation. We're going to have you back on, Nate, and get into this a little deeper. So, Kevin?
Yeah, Nate, thanks for coming on the show, man. I could talk to you probably for hours and hours on end about this kind of stuff, because this is the stuff we love, and it's kind of funny because you don't ever run into people a lot of times that are on the same wavelength as you. And so to have you on the show and to talk about things that we're so passionate about, it's great, man. And I appreciate you coming on, and I wish you guys all the best. I look forward to potentially getting maybe some of that AJ Sour Diesel from you, because from what I remember, that shit was bomb.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Kevin, you beat me to everything. Again. Always. Even to the sour diesel cut. But no, it's a pleasure, man. We should definitely get in touch sometime. And we love having like-minded people on the show. So like Ryan said, yeah, come on back anytime.
Nate, any final words or words of wisdom for the audience?
Man, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Basically, it's the same. It's just a pleasure getting on here and to be able to talk through things like this with people who have kind of the same interests and the same passions and are butting up against some of the same kind of things. And then one of the final things I want to say is that I'm really happy that somebody brought caregivers into this conversation, because those guys built this house and we need to continue supporting them, and we always do.
100%.
Amen to that, brother.
We need them to remind us of what real cannabis looks like.
That's right.
Otherwise, it'll just turn into corporate boof everywhere. We're swimming in it. And then they start throwing people back in jail again. Stupid.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I know I was a caregiver in 2009. Tom, I'm sure you were too. Kevin, you were before that in Colorado. I mean, that's always will be, always, always deep in that, and we're going to keep fighting that. I love it just based on, it's been an open source of information. One of the reasons Michigan is where it's at is the 40,000 caregivers got to exchange information, exchange ideas, genetics, and learn. So we got some of the best growers in the country. But with that, hey, thanks for being on, Nate, but I wanted to invite all of you guys, and then also the audience. I know there's a lot of professionals on there. Myself and Covert Law moved down the street to 920 North Washington Ave in Old Town Lansing. There's a lot of history in this building. And we're having an open house next Friday, the 29th. At 3 o'clock it starts. The chamber will be here at 3:30 for a ribbon cutting. There'll be Eastside Fish Fry. Our good friend Henry is bringing the food. There's a open bar, and there'll be smoking going on after about 5 o'clock or so. We gotta let the politicians probably leave, unfortunately. But yeah, everyone's invited. If you're listening to this, swing on through, and it's going to be a great time. So with that, hope to see everyone next week and maybe next Friday.
Thanks, guys.